You are listening to the BBNI Podcast, Journeys of Faith, Leadership and Life.
We are back again with another episode of the BBNI Podcast. I'm Lisa Keys and I'm Chief Officer of the Northern Ireland Boys Brigade. I'm really excited to be launching Season 3 of the BBNI Podcast. And last year, we launched the podcast with Season 1 with David Blevins, the outgoing President of the Boys Brigade Northern Ireland District. Today, I am really excited and delighted because I am joined by the new President of the Northern Ireland Boys Brigade, Mark Smyth. So, Mark, congratulations on your appointment and welcome to the BBNI Podcast. It is so good to have you here. Timing wise, it is so brilliant that we're launching Season 3 as we launch a new season and a new era for Boys Brigade. And before we get into some of the questions, I would just love if you could introduce yourself and tell our listeners and our viewers a wee bit about Mark Smyth.
Thank you, Lisa. And yes, it's a great privilege and honour to be here and for this role. I'm very excited about that. And I'm Mark. I'm married to Claire for, better get this right, 33 years now. Just passed there in September. I've got two children, Andrew and Laura, both married to Bethany and to Ethan. And as you know, my son's a BB captain. Brilliant. And Bethany's working here full time. So we're very much, and Claire and I met through Boys Brigade at a KG6 course. So BB's very much in our blood as a family. So, you know, that's a wee bit about me and the family and what have you. I grew up in Larne. Went to Craigie Hill Presbyterian Church, was a member of 3rd Larne Boys Brigade as a boy from Anchor Boys right up through till I got my Queen's Badge, the Gold Duke of Edinburgh, and became an officer there at that time. But I moved when I met Claire then at the KG6 course. We went on and got married then a few years later, and I've been living now in St. Field for about the last 33 years.
Brilliant place to live.
Yes, nice place. All the best people come from St. Field, they tell me. But I left school at 16, became a fitter welder in a factory in Larne, then went to work in Shorts, but always had this dream to be a firefighter and joined the fire service in 1993. And just retired there earlier this year in June after almost 31 years service in the fire service. So that was good. And what I'd love to be still playing lots of sport, but unfortunately my knees, back and ankles and everything else don't work as well. So still do a bit of skiing every year, which I love. Great. Love to walk, love to take the dog out for a walk. And since retirement, I've sort of enjoyed the good life with my veggie patch and my chickens out the back. So yes.
Oh, wow, sounds idyllic.
It really genuinely is. If we could just get this weather more often, that'd be great. But yeah, that's a wee bit about me. I'm sure there's lots more we can talk about, but we'll maybe get to some of that as we move in.
Super, thank you. And you did mention Mark BB, so you're no stranger to the Boys Brigade. And I know that was something whenever we were looking at recruiting for a new president, it was very important that someone did know the organisation, but you've lived experience both as a boy, as a leader, as a captain. So tell us a little bit about BB for you, and maybe what's your best memory of your time in BB?
Oh, right, okay. Heavily involved in Boys Brigade. I owe so much to it from my professional side of my life, as in my leadership and those qualities as a boy in 3rd Larne, going on to be an officer, working under a BB captain who was just an incredible godly man. Tough. He was a tough BB captain. He was one of those BB captains that his boys meant everything to him and his company meant everything to him, and he didn't get involved much outside of his company in doing things, but he was so committed. My whole leadership style and everything, a lot of it's down to what his example was in those days. So as a BB captain, as a mentor, as a coach, he was fabulous. And then there's a man, Brian Clinaghan, who was an officer at that time, who from a spiritual perspective was such a mentor to me, and Brian just unfortunately passed away in the last year, but he meant so much to me, and he helped me so much grow as a young Christian, and then mentored me, and has up until recently we'd have met and chatted, and Brian was just such a man of God. And so those two men, particularly within Boys Brigade while I was in Larne, had such an influence on me. So they had a big influence professionally as a leader, but also then as a Christian. As I've said, met Claire, my lovely wife, who is very special, in 1989 at a KG6 course. We met there, but we didn't get together till afterwards, just so that we've got that. Very, very important. And then when we got married, I moved to St. Fair, became a BB captain there. And we both were national training officers in the Boys Brigade. So it meant an awful lot to us. And as I've said, my son's a BB captain now. Bethany works here full time. BB means an awful lot to us. And so when I was approached about this role, I was nervous because I'm not sure about it. And I knew Professor Nevin and I know David, and I thought, oh wow, President, but actually, I think I've tried to run away from it, but the Lord has said to me, no, Jonah, come back here. Have a wee role for you. So I'm really excited about where that role might be. You've asked me what my favourite things. I've really thought about that. And there's so many. It's difficult. But as a boy, I loved the whole idea of sport. I love sport, playing all sorts of sport. But particularly, our BB captain was very forward thinking. We had a youth club night in Boys Brigade in those days. In another way, now you've got so many activities outside of Boys Brigade. People can go to football academies and different things. They didn't have so much of that in those days. So BB done a lot of that. So we had this BB youth club night. And it used to be in the church, and we used to go on a Tuesday night, and it was the same night the badminton club was on in the church. So you used to go in and you played pool, you played table tennis, did darts, there was a tuck shop, bit of music, and the boys just was loaded with boys.
Wow.
Loved it. So that's a very fond memory for me. And playing battalion football and that level of football. And then we used to go to camp to Southport. Every year. Oh, BB camps are, I don't know if they still really happen much or not.
Oh, there's a lot of BB camps,
wow, BB, such an influence on me. As a young Christian, BB you had every night, and it was regimental, it was disciplined, it was uniformed, it was, you had to do your drill, you had to do your classes, you had to do everything. But when you would go away to camp, there was this freedom to really get to know the officers, to get to really talk to them and talk about issues away from home, and it was a beautiful time. I couldn't encourage BB camps enough for those relationship ones. As an officer, interestingly, I've thought about that. Lots of, influencing young men, influencing young boys, coming down the Anchor Boys and doing parachute games and duck goose and doing all that stuff and going mad and throwing my jacket off and I used to love it. Junior section. You know, I remember we were just talking to Claire last night and how we used to do figure marching to Fine Young Cannibals, and because it was the rate, and it was almost heresy in the day, but it was really good, bit of energy around junior section. But actually, one of the biggest things that influenced me or has an impact on me in the past was we did a cross community piece of work in St. Field, down battalion when I was captain there with the Catholic Boy Scouts of Downpatrick.
Brilliant.
And being a man from Larne, that was an interesting concept. Oh, I learned so much about me. And when we were able to take our two communities away out of Northern Ireland, went again to Scotland, riding bikes in the Alps, expedition and stuff, it was fabulous just to see how much alike we all were. And that really gave me a drive about my diversity and how I see this country moving forward. And I love to see where we are now. So that had a major influence on me as an officer, and I felt that was really, really important. And I enjoyed that. So, but there's lots of, we could talk, we just do a podcast just on favourite times on TV.
And there's so much in that you have pulled out that epitomises BB. So you talked about the role model of, those two officers and how they role modelled behaviour that had an influence on you. You've talked about, just the journey as a boy, as a leader, as a captain. There's so much in there. And actually talking about, this is great for me. So I'm learning so much about you that will actually help in terms of the role that you're now coming into. Yeah. I sat yesterday with my colleagues from the uniformed sector, and we were actually talking to some people about how can we get funding to do something where all 6 organisations come together and bring the young people together to do something. So actually it is brilliant that you've just said that, because now we can have a chat about that off air and talk about maybe how you could get involved in helping us with that if we can get that lined up, because we all believe within the 6 organisations we all serve a slightly different purpose. So people come to us because they want to come to that Christian BB ministry, but they go to some of those other organisations for other things, but we can all learn from each other. So
but I think the great thing about all the different organisations, as I learned through working with the Catholic Boy Scouts, was that actually the voluntary leaders are here because they love young people.
Yes.
And they want to develop young people, and it's about the whole picture of the young person.
Yeah.
And yes, we are about the advancement of Christ's kingdom, and absolutely. And I'm not apologetic about that at all. In fact, I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
But there is no reason why, under that collective approach, we have so much in common with all the other organisations. So I see that as a very exciting move forward, Lisa. Yeah,
because we have to shine. If we don't shine as salt and light,
absolutely,
within people who don't know God, we're not actually taking seriously the Great Commission and going out and reaching people. So much more we can talk about on that. So we'll park that and come back.
Okay.
So at the beginning, I said that we launched the BBNI podcast last year with our outgoing president, David Blevins. And David's role as president evolved over his tenure. He was president for 8 years, and due to the context of the environment, the new governance structure, that role all evolved. But the role that you're now stepping into is a different role. And I always tell staff that we don't replace people when people feel that it's time to go, but we replace positions, because each person brings their own skills, their own gifts, their own style, and that can't be replaced. A few years ago, you were on the other side of the microphone as David in his day job as a correspondent for Sky News, and he interviewed you, and you have spoken to David in the lead up to this.
Yeah, we did.
But David sent me a message for this podcast, and I'm just going to read it. So he said, "When I first met Mark Smyth, he was leading a team from the Northern Ireland Fire and Rescue Service attempting to extinguish a blaze on Steve Donard. And 3 years later, I offer him some advice. Keep the fire burning." Having chatted with Mark, I'm confident that he has burning passion for advancing Christ's kingdom in a new generation. And every transition is an opportunity for a fresh commitment. And as you know, David is and always will be a big friend of BBNI. So with that in mind, my question to you is, what are you looking forward to as you make this role your own and you start on this journey as the president of the Northern Ireland Boys Brigade?
Well, I'm so glad I'm not replacing a person, that I am actually replacing the role, as we talk about, because when I think of Professor Neville and I think of David, I think, because actually that did make me nervous whenever we talked about this at the start. And I do bring probably something different, and we all need to bring what we have. And I think when the Lord leads you into something, you need to be open to what He's leading you into do. And you need to be reflective. You need to understand what skills He has given you, because we're only here because of the skills He's given me and the influences I've talked about, BB captain and BB officers in the past, and all other sorts of influences I've had. But as we talked about earlier, actually before we came in, I was heavily involved in Boys Brigade for many, many years. And then as work got busier, I pulled back a bit because of commitment to work for quite a few years, and I've been out of the circuit, as I would describe it. But you have had this move to BBNI, which I think is really, really exciting. But I've got no baggage with that. I've got no history with that. I don't understand. Well, I do understand the challenges that were, or the positives that were, and all that. But I'm excited about having the freedom to make this role my own. Yeah. And I think as we move into this new era of BBNI, there's an exciting new vision of raising generations of Christ-like men. Yeah. And I think we're in a world where we need our men to be Christ-like. We hear all the reports. We hear all the reports of misogyny. We hear all that. And even today in the news I've heard that. And we need to be setting an example of what real men of God should be. And it's certainly not anything to do with that. So I'm really excited about that new vision and how we're going to drive that forward. And actually trying to be an example of living that out. And I feel miserable. I feel every day. And I'm not standing here saying I'm great at it. But I'm looking forward to trying to live that out. And it's really challenged me to think about that. The big thing for me around, and we'll talk later about collective and compassionate leadership, is about engaging with our boys. First and foremost, I want to get out. I want to get out and about. I want to call in. I mightn't be in my shirt and my jacket, but maybe in my shorts and my t-shirt or my jumper, and call in to see boys and do parachute games and do duck goose. And that's the first big thing I want to do. And then I want to come alongside our officers, because, as I've said before, these officers have such a job, such a role, such a responsibility to advance the Christ kingdom among our boys. And that's so important. And then the other part of that is parents. I want to meet parents. I want to hear what it's like on the ground. I want to know what I can do better to help bring everybody together. And the freedom of being the president, not being on the board, not being a trustee, I'm excited about that. And so on. I want to get around our battalions and our events. So that's a big part of what I want to do this first year, to get out there and be present and show people I support them. The other part of it then is I really want to support the board and yourself. And that will be important to me. And the team, I've met the team this morning. Really excited. What a team. They are lovely. All working really hard, trying really hard. And of course, I have a personal connection there with Bethany. But I'm really looking forward to doing that and how we do it. And the last thing is, I really hope there's lots of chats and lots of coffee. Because, I mean, this is what sold the job to me.
And maybe a few buns.
And we'll have to stay away from the buns. I'll stick with the fruit maybe if we can. But no, yes, I enjoy a bun too. But I'm looking forward to that, actually. I think business used to be done over a golf club and a game of golf. I think business is done over a cup of coffee now, a cup of tea or
a Diet Coke.
A Diet Coke
Zero,
man.
For me.
Absolutely. But I think as president, it's so important about being relational, and that's the part I'm really looking forward to. And it's an area I think the Lord has given me gifting in, and I hope to be able to use that to meet with people and bring people with us, and let's go on this journey together. This new vision, this new BBNI. Let's really drive it forward to see young people, young men, coming up through from joining Anchor Boys, up the junior section, up the company section, and hopefully being very Christ-like by the time they move on from that, whether they're officers or they move on to ordinary life without being officers, and leading young men to Christ. It excites me.
And it's so exciting to hear that. And, you know, as we've said, you're replacing a position. David left a legacy of listening and talking, and loved nothing more than going and sitting down with people and having a chat. We, over the past 3 years, in terms of how the staff all operate, it's all about engagement. It's about getting to know those leaders, and we have fabulous leaders who week after week, they do the hard work. You know, they're there week after week, committed and enthusiastic, and dealing with whatever comes in the door in terms of the issues that maybe boys are coming having had a bad day, and they're dealing with all of that, and they maybe have had a bad day themselves as leaders, but they've picked up their bag and away they've gone, and it's BB. And so it's lovely to have somebody else who can continue to do that, because, you know, we've 2,400 leaders. Brilliant. We try and engage as much as we can, but we can't get round them all. So the more people that are going and having those conversations and helping us all together with that one vision of advancing Christ's kingdom, it's brilliant. It really is. So Mark, you have carved out an impressive career in the Northern Ireland Fire and Rescue Service, in operational at the sharp end, and then moving on to leadership. And something that you've already mentioned in this podcast, but I've also heard you say it in other podcasts, in conversations, I've read it in some commentaries, but you talk about collective and compassionate leadership. So for those who don't really know and maybe have a bit of an idea, I know what those words are, but what is collective and compassionate leadership?
How long do we have? Honestly, we could do this.
We can do 3 or 4 different podcasts.
I think we could in each element of collective and compassionate leadership. But I suppose for me, before I go into it, it is one area that I would love to really zoom in on as a president here in Boys Brigade this year, about being a collective and very much being a compassionate leader. And what I mean when I say collective leadership, there's 4 very clear elements to collective leadership, and not in any particular order for them compared to the compassionate piece. There's systems, and about getting our systems to talk to each other. How often have we been in work and one department system isn't talking to another department system? Before you know it, frustrates things and delays things and what have you. And when you look across our battalions, for instance, we probably have lots of different things going on. You look across those 6 organisations that you were meeting with this week, probably lots of different systems. How do we develop that collectively? In the emergency services, we have a thing called JESIT, Joint Emergency Services Interoperability Programme, and we brought that together. We were doing it on the fireground. But we brought that together. We're now all saying the same thing. There's a consistency across our emergency services and our emergency planning with councils and different organisations. So that systematic piece is so important and not to be forgotten about. Then it's about working across our teams. So when you think about your team here, all the different roles they have and all the different committees they sit on, among all the battalions, all the companies, everything like that, all those teams need to work together. So how do we do that in a consistent way? How do we bring everybody together? So teams are important, identifying those teams. And that leads on into the next piece, the responsibility at all levels. The leaders at all levels, because I think we have leaders at all levels in an organisation. I'm not going to start putting those levels in because I'll offend somebody probably. But there's leaders at all levels, and everybody should see themselves as leading whatever they're doing in your. And if you go to your team here, and they're all leaders in different things. So you go to your company, you know, if there's a senior boy doing his King's badge it is now, and having to do some service within the company, he's leading there.
Yeah.
Then you have officers who are leading, and you have captains who are leading, you have battalion officials who are leading. There's people leading at all levels. That's really important. What does that really mean? But we have to be clear about those roles and responsibilities. And when people have clarity in that, then people understand the role.
Yeah.
We have accountability. We have assurance that the job's being done right. And also people then start to feel valued because they have a role.
Yeah.
It's very clear what that role is. And sometimes we don't get this all right. At all levels too. Important. And I keep compassionate leadership to the end each time because I get down into the element of this because I think this is really where the crux of it is. And I think being in our Christian organisation for boys that we have, compassionate leadership just lends itself to this. Yeah. Even as a believer, it lends itself to a nice structure of being very Christ-like. Like our vision has said about young men raising generations of Christ-like men. And this isn't in order, and I think we need to get this order right. Because what happens is we get it wrong quite often. We start with the last bit, and then that's why we got it wrong, because we haven't done the first 3 elements. 4 elements to compassionate leadership. There's being present. There's being in attendance. So you as a chief officer, you need to be present with your team. Yeah. You need to be present with battalion officials. You need to be present with companies. As a president, I'm going to have to be present. So the first thing you start with to be a compassionate leader, I think this comes down to our BB officers, to our battalion officials, to all that right across. They need to be present. So we need to be there. It's about building relationships. You can't build a relationship if you're not in attendance, if you're not present. Look at the challenge we had during COVID. Look at the challenge of working from home. Look at the challenge of trying to do those things without being there. And look at the benefit of face-to-face. So being present, really important. That's the first thing you have to do. Don't try and do anything else until you do that. When you're present, then the next thing that you can do then is listen with fascination to the other person or to the team you're with, or listen to understand where they're at. Only then will you start to know where they've come from. You'll only understand the context. You need to know all that before you can lead. So that's so important to do that. That leads then to being empathetic to the boy, to the officer, to the captain, to the battalion, to the team, to yourself, to the board, to the trust, to everyone, to the other organisations that maybe want to work with, those 6 of you. Yeah. These are all meeting. These are actually practicing this because you meet, you are present, you are listening to each other, and now you can start to empathise with all the problems you are all having, whether it's funding, whether it's bringing people together, whether it's competing with other organisations. How do you keep your numbers up? How do you keep getting your vision out there? How do you do that? Only then can you empathise. Now then, this is the exciting bit for me, is the last part of this. So if we're present, if we listen to understand who we're with, we can empathise, we can go the journey with them, we can support them, we can do everything else. Only then can you take the appropriate action. So quite often, like with yourself, Lisa, like with myself in the fire service, we're so busy, quite often you just need to go, we're being pushed for timelines, just do it, let's just get that done. Not listening to what the team's going through to try and get that done, not being there to see what they're going through, not empathising with them, and then we take this inappropriate action. So if you do these elements of it as a compassionate leader, you will take that appropriate action. So being present, listening, empathising, and then taking appropriate action, and in that order. Don't get those the wrong way around. So I see that as and for Boys Brigade, for a Christian organisation, for believers anywhere, actually for leaders in the world as well, even outside of the Christian ethos, compassionate leadership, I think, is where it's at. And we'll deal with all the taking all the right action, doing that in that order. So yeah, that's what, don't know, hopefully that's explained collective and compassionate leadership, but it is an area I would love to really drive forward here in our first year, second year of being the president, and see what we can bring to that as we move forward into the new BBNI era, you know.
And I can't help thinking, you know, we've just had our Abide event, and our Abide event, the whole theme of that was how do we abide in Jesus before we go and do our leadership. And I can't help thinking that principle just links so nicely. We've got to be present with God first and foremost before we begin to do anything else. And what a great reminder of that coming through in that. So I look forward to developing that. And I can't help thinking too how many times that we get it wrong because we don't first be present. So we're reacting to what we think a situation is, but actually we're not present in that situation to understand it, to be able to then work it through before we take that action. And that's a lesson to us all, isn't it?
Learning all the time.
Particularly when we're busy and we just jump in.
Yeah.
Mark, we've talked about, you know, you've worked in the fire service, you've worked operationally, you've worked in senior management, and it can't have been without challenges, especially spanning the career that you've had and the length of time. But how have you seen your leadership style changing as you've responded to the challenges of the different roles as you've progressed within the fire service?
First of all, to set the context, I lived the dream. For over 30 years in what I think is the best job in the world. It's all I ever wanted to be. Left with such a lovely taste in my mouth there just recently after almost 31 years service. Fantastic organisation, fantastic people, and the public. I just loved working and helping and supporting the public, as do all firefighters. Really good. But I joined it in 93, was just before the ceasefire in 95.
Okay.
I was a firefighter in Springfield Road Fire Station. To say it was a tight spot would be an underestimation of it. It was tight for a few years, learnt my trade really well, but we had a very, and yet I think we had to then in those days, a very command and control attitude to leadership and management. And the higher the things were on my shoulder, the more I told you what to do, you did it. Didn't need to have a discussion about it. But that led to a very, I wouldn't go as far to say, big ego. I was going to say narcissistic, not narcissistic, but big egos. And we were a world of big egos. But over those years and over the last 10 years, I've started to see that whole compassionate collective leadership piece. The need for working together, the need for listening. I mean, some of the best ideas came from our fire stations whenever we spent time looking at things. If you ever needed something tested or looked at, throw it to a group of firefighters and I can assure you that they're solution-based.
Okay.
And brilliant. Now, our best and brightest people were sitting in fire stations all the time, and they were brilliant when it came to driving things forward. So that collective approach started to change. So I was a firefighter for about 15 years. If you ask some of my colleagues, they would tell you he was a rocket. I was loud, I was bolshy, I was arrogant at times, obnoxious probably, and so not my proudest moments at times as a firefighter. But as I started to move on after 15 years, decided I'd have a go at the leadership piece. I started to learn so much about that. So poacher turned gamekeeper, some people would say, but I hope I was always compassionate. I hope I was always cared about people. And that was important to me. And I hope as I went up through my leadership within the ranks or the roles to area commander in Belfast and Lisburn, I hope I kept that all the time, that people mattered. And I think it was really important. And the higher up I went, the more important it was to emphasise that.
Yeah.
The more important it was to spend time with people and bring people with you. Because actually as an area commander, you didn't do the work. You needed really good people around you, so you needed to support people. That was really important. So that molded my leadership style. I had a period in headquarters where I looked after improvement and assurance and accountability and all that. That really taught me that, as I talk about the blue side of data and getting evidence and gathering that. And in the last 4 or 5 years in the service, I was responsible for bringing around an accountability and assurance system in work. So that changed how I looked at leadership too, and evidentially basing decision making was so important. And now we're starting to see it's not just your professional opinion after 30 years in the service. It's not good enough anymore. You need the evidence to prove it. And you can see from the Manchester Arenas, you can see from the Grenfell reports and everything else, the importance of that assurance and accountability around training, around doing the right thing. You need the evidence to do that. And I really think that's important. So that changed my whole leadership style, that while there's this compassionate piece, and this, if we talked about the presence to take the appropriate action, you have this other side whenever you talk about the collective leadership of leaders at all levels, of accountability at all levels, of systematic approach to things. And so that changed my style of leader to do that too. And I can see how that can work in Boys Brigade as well. And I'm sure I'm sure there's a lot of stuff when you're in part of the Charities Commission and making sure we do the right thing.
Absolutely.
So that our boys are safe. So that our boys get the best we can give them. That's what's important.
And that's the challenge sometimes, because, our role here in Newport, we're not running a Boys Brigade company. We are managing the organisation, which is a company and a charity, and all the bureaucracy that goes alongside that, all the regulatory stuff. And we do it because we're trying to do the very best for children and young people. And that sometimes is a tension when you're sitting across what you're doing in the day, knowing that you just have to do this stuff because that is what is required of us. But the outworking of that is we're doing it for the purpose of we're advancing Christ's kingdom with boys. So no matter how hard sometimes the pits or how tedious some of the things are, the end result is the very best that it could be. So that's how you keep going. How has faith played a role in your leadership journey, or in those challenges? Because I'm sure in the fire service there are situations that are grim, that you face from the practicalities of what, at the very front line that you do. But also, as a Christian firefighter, has there been opportunities to share your faith, or how has that worked as you've moved in different areas and had different opportunities within the fire service?
Yeah, there's some dark times in that job. And I think it impacts on different people in different ways. We're all different. And you find that as a Christian within the organisation, as I've said before, those early days probably very challenging, really challenging, and I failed miserably and many times.
We all do.
But the important piece, I hope, as a character, I was always compassionate. I was always empathetic. I tried to journey with people. I tried to be honest where I could and when I could and at all times. But what was really important to me was about my integrity. And when I said yes, it was yes. When I said no, it was no. And maybe in the early days, trying to get away from it was dead easy in the organisation to gossip and to talk about people. And if one person feels it's that big egotistic thing, one person feels, we love to hang out with them, love to talk about them, there's nothing we love more. And unfortunately, I got myself gathered into that quite often, and I had to deal with that as a Christian, never worried just as a decent human being. So I tried to be an example. And when I talk about example, as a young Christian in Craigie Hill, as we've already talked about in the Christian church there, very forward-thinking youth work. As a young Christian around 13, 14, 15, I can't remember now, but they were asking us in the youth fellowship, take a Bible study. And I just opened up, took James chapter 2, 14 to 26. It's entitled in the NIV, Faith and Good Deeds. Little did I know this would become who I was. So why do I say that? It tells you in there that you will show your faith by what you do. So it's a big practical application of your Christian life. This isn't me shying away from being overt or extrovert in your Christian life in the workplace. And I'm not sure that that's the right thing to do. I think, yes, we keep our faith and our Christian life separate at times, but we still need to be salt and light in our workplace. But I think we do that through living it out rather than being overt and in people's faces all the time about it. So that's about living your faith, and that has always stood by me. Little did I know the Lord has a plan and everything. And some of the examples, loads of examples, people who have had very dark times, people with a bit of PTSD at times, which is very serious for some firefighters. I've been very fortunate so far. Nothing has come to haunt me. But I only go there because of the grace of God at the moment. And who knows what the future holds. But I've journeyed a lot with a lot of our firefighters and officers and doing that. And it's about that compassionate and empathetic way and that compassionate leadership piece coming alongside people. But two particular examples over recent years as an area commander. A friend who at the moment doesn't have a personal walk with the Lord, but very empathetic. Really supportive of me as a Christian. Asked me to speak at his father's funeral last year.
What a privilege.
It was an honour, a privilege. I don't do that sort of thing. In fact, I've never done it before. And he asked me to come and conduct the service there. And it was a real opportunity to share who I was, what I was. But what it did say to me was this guy knew who I was by the way I lived my life. And I don't think I have ever at any stage went to him overtly about Christianity or pushed it. We've talked often about different things around Christianity, but I've never pushed them on it. And I hope that witness of living it out will one day get to a place where, if someone's interested in coming to know the Lord, I certainly would love that conversation with anybody. And another piece, during COVID period, I went to Western Area Command, which is London, Derry, Stroke City, whatever you want to call it. I don't want to be offensive to anybody about it, but I went up there as area commander for about 3.5 years. What a fantastic part of the world, fantastic people, caring people, loyal people, hard-working people, honest. You want honest and integrity? Go to Western Area Command in the fire service and you get it. Really good people. The whole area command covers really from the very top northwest all the way down to Enniskillen, Balik, all the way down, basically the other side of the river, of the Ban. West of the Ban, everything's western. Big area, very remote in many places. Lots of part-time firefighters. So during that time of COVID, we're all locked down. We're only going to fire calls. We weren't meeting to train. We weren't meeting to. We didn't meet to check very much. We just met to go to fire calls, and we did it under very strict conditions, protecting our firefighters the very best we could. At that time, Zoom came in. I had no idea about Zoom.
None of us did.
Had to learn very quickly. But as area commander, I met. There was 4 districts within that area command, and I met with the watch commanders who were in charge of the stations, the part-time stations, quite regularly to see how they were, touching base every 5 or 6 weeks. I have a whiteboard up in my office at home, which I get a lot of stick about, but I'm a whiteboard person because I forget, so I write things down. All good. That's my excuse anyway. If I haven't got a whiteboard, I can't do business. But interestingly, as we started to go along those meetings, and families and some of our watch commanders and some of our officers and some of our firefighters were starting to take very seriously ill, scarily ill, to the point of possibly losing firefighters, and some people did lose family members and what have you. I started to explain to people, I'm a praying man, I'm a man of God. Wasn't apologetic about it at all, but it just lent itself to it. And I didn't normally do that. For 25 years of my career, I didn't push that at all. And all of a sudden I started writing names up on the board.
Okay.
And all these names were on the board. So when people were on the screen, you could see these names on the board.
Wow.
And I know there's probably confidentiality and data protection and all, but just one name.
Yeah.
And nobody would have known anything more about it. But actually, they did start to understand it was my prayer list. And I said I would pray. So when somebody was telling me somebody was, what's their name? And I'd put it up. And then the next meeting, I'd say, well, how's Johnny keeping? How's Michael keeping? What about? But one of our watch commanders actually took very, very ill, and we thought we were going to lose him. He went off screen for quite a few months. And then he came back on again. And I had him on the list, and we were praying for him. And every meeting I was having with the district, I said, well, how's Michael doing? All right, okay, that's not good. And he came back on. He recovered, thankfully. Great answer to prayer for me, anyway. It was just beautiful. And he says, by the way, Mark, you can take my name off the list now. Don't need to pray for me
Wow.
anymore. And it was incredible. Long-serving watch commander.
Yeah.
And these are all long-serving officers, male and female. And tough jobs, really difficult jobs. To be honest, they're the chief of the town.
Yeah.
They do such a job. They are owned by the fire service. What they give is incredible. And so, those last few years in the fire service, last 5 years, was probably the most overt time of my Christian faith as an area commander. And had great opportunities to do it. So I would encourage people to be slightly more overt, but not be overbearing. There's nothing worse than an overbearing Christian. But please live your faith out, and the Lord will provide you with the opportunities to be overt about it.
It's that living faith, isn't it?
It is.
Because Jesus is alive, and he wants us to have a living faith for him. And he gives us those opportunities, and he equips us when he does give us those opportunities, doesn't he? But sometimes we just need that wee reminder that he will equip us.
I need it reminded very regularly.
As we
think I feel
about
miserable.
that. I think we all do, Mark. I certainly do as well. It's just sometimes those missed opportunities, but God has a way of bringing those back round. I think, doesn't he?
Yeah.
In everything.
He does.
So, Mark, you were in the BB, you were a captain, you will know the object of the Boys Brigade, and that is the advancement of Christ's kingdom amongst boys and the promotion of habits of obedience, reverence, discipline, self-respect, and all that tends towards a true Christian manliness. And we have just launched our new strategy. We've talked about the vision is to raise generations of Christ-like men, and it's a very, very exciting time for the organisation. We've launched our new strategy. We've a new president coming in to help us with that strategy. It's a very challenging vision we have to raise generations of Christ-like men, particularly in the times that we live in. And, the children and young people that we work with are not the same as we were. They're not having the same things to deal with as we had whenever we were younger. And so we have a challenging vision, but we're committed to that vision. And from listening to you about collective and compassionate leadership, that's what we need to all be able to play our part, the whole of the BB family playing our part in that vision. So I suppose this is a hard question maybe, because sometimes we hate talking about our own skills, our own gifts, but what are you going to bring to the table in helping us all to collectively and compassionately deliver that vision?
Lots of coffee and buns.
Great.
No, seriously. I suppose I've made so many mistakes in the past. I do know where my gaps are. I've identified lots of them. And I listen to others who tell me where they are sometimes. But also over the years, I have seen where the Lord has gifted me in some areas, and around this compassionate and collective leadership is a natural gifting that the Lord has given me, and I really enjoy it. I get passionate about it. I get excited about it. I think it really has great benefits, and especially within an organisation where we want to advance Christ's kingdom among our boys and to raise generations of Christ-like men. I think we live in a world where I'm not sure men know what their purpose is anymore, what their role is as men. We see so many bad reports publicly, even this morning on the news, hearing the reports of what's been happening, the misogyny that's going on. It's hard to believe in this day and age that still happens, that we do not have equality, and we do not have diversity. We've seen what's happened over recent months across the UK with some of our immigrants who are coming in, and how we treat people. It's beyond my understanding that. So I think there's a great challenge, especially among young men, and I'm involved in men's ministry in our church. I do a wee bit of work around Rumble, the men's ministry organisation with Spud and the team there. And I just see Boys Brigade fitting into that. And how are we developing our young men and supporting our young boys and doing things again. So I think the first thing that I will bring, sorry about taking so long to say the context, but it's important, a listening empathetic ear. That's what I'm hoping I'm going to bring. Yeah. And it's always been a challenge for me to listen. I talk no problem. Talk all day, unfortunately, and I've had to sit in my hands quite often to listen. But it's important to do that. And if I'm going to be a compassionate leader, I've talked about listening to understand people. Very important. I think one of the big priorities for me, for this next year or whatever, 2 years or whatever length of time it is, and I hope it stays a priority, is about bringing people together as we advance that kingdom. And that's at all levels. That's whether boys, juniors level and anchors level, up into company level, but also advancing that kingdom among our officers too. Supporting them to do the job well. And it's about bringing people together. Like, we all know we went independent. We're BBNI now, and we've done it for a year. I'm sure this is the pleasure of being out of Boys Brigade for 10, 15 years. I have got no real understanding of the challenges that possibly yourself and David and the team faced, or the challenges that officers have faced and battalions have faced trying to get to there. I'm sure it was a battle. Change always is. But I'm very excited about the independence of BBNI. And so I think the battle's been had, whatever that looked like. The challenge has been had. I've got no baggage for that. I am so excited about trying to bring people together so we're all going together the same way. And I'm sure there will be challenges around that. But I'm looking forward to that. I like challenge. As I've talked before, being a presence and a support across our battalions. I would love to get out across all our battalions this next year. Don't tell Claire. She'll be saying, you're never here, you're never in. It'll be like the old days. But I'd love to try and get across, whether it's an event in a battalion, whether it's to the battalion meeting, whether it's meeting with the battalion team, whatever. I don't think I'm going to get to the 2,400 litres for coffee and buns.
Not in the first year.
Not in the first year. Maybe we'll leave that to the second one. But you know, I'd love to do that presence and support piece. And the last thing I think I bring, and I think I'm very fortunate the Lord has gifted me with that, and it can be pain for some people who it's too much for them, is my energy and enthusiasm. And I think I have a real love and desire to see this idea of the vision of raising generations of Christ-like men. So I hope I can bring some energy to that, some enthusiasm to that. I really believe in it. I think it's fabulous. Honestly, I had nothing to do with it, but wow, am I really looking forward to what that looks like in the next 100 days, 12 months, 36 months, and then we'll see what happens after that. But, you know, bringing that enthusiasm and that energy about it, because, wow, if you can't get excited about raising generations of Christ-like men in the Boys Brigade, not sure what we're actually about if that's not what we're about. And so it should be easy to be energetic and enthusiastic about it. So, hope
Brilliant. Brilliant. Well, look, we're almost at the end of this podcast, Mark. I have been delighted that we've been able to use this podcast to introduce you in a small way to the BB membership. Some people will know you, and to our wider audience who listen and watch our podcasts. It is a great time for the organisation. God has been faithful over many years. He has been so faithful over the last couple of years. And we're expectant about what God is going to do through the organisation. We're excited about our strategy. We're all bought into it. But your enthusiasm and the freshness is really welcome coming, because we've gone through a bit of a journey and sometimes you can get a little bit jaded. But one thing that we're also committed to is just seeing out that vision and continuing to advance Christ's kingdom. So it has been great to have this time. We will do some more podcasts. I think what we need to do is we need to come back again next year and just pause and reflect and see how God has used us both and used the team and the leaders on the ground in BB in this next year. So let's commit to doing that, to take a bit of time in a year's time to pause and reflect on that. But anyone who has listened to any of these podcasts know that any of our hosts ask the same question at the end. And I actually love this, because this is the gems that you can write down and say, oh, that's the tip that they gave. So what is the one piece of advice that you wish you had been given when you were younger?
There's two bits. But
okay, we'll give you two.
There's two elements to it. My first bit is people around me probably wished I was given this advice, and that was to listen more and talk less. Talking's very natural to me, but I've had to learn as I've got older, especially as a Christian, but also as a leader in the organisation, in the fire service, to listen more and not be so forthright with my advice. And I don't like silences. So if you feel me, tell me to be quiet. But no, actually, what advice would I give to myself? As I look back and I go into retirement from the fire service, I challenge myself. I'm not a great reader. my personal walk's a challenge for me in the reading piece of it. I need fellowship. I need to be with people, and that's how I grow as a believer. That's just who I am. I'm sure somebody much brighter than me could tell me what that meant. But the lack of reading, I think sometimes it's challenged me to be more to Christ. So I've challenged myself not to learn to read, but to learn to take time to read more, and spend more time with the Lord and His Word. If we want to be more like Him, then we need to read His Word.
Yeah.
It tells us all about Him. It's all about it. I mean, He is the Word. So the more we read of it, the more like we'll be like Him, the more we'll act like Him in our actions and our words. So that piece of advice, I think I would give my younger self, or that I would give to any young leader in Boys Brigade now. And actually, I don't think we're ever too old to learn a new way.
No.
I know for me, I'm constantly learning. I think as good leaders, we should be always learning, no matter how long we're along the road. That one piece of advice: be more like Christ in our example, in our actions and in our words. And hopefully people will see Christ in us and want more of Him, and then you'll get the opportunities. So that would be the advice I would give the 20-year-old Mark Smyth, because I'm not sure I got that right all the time, especially in my early days in the fire service. It was a challenging time.
What a way to end. What great advice to end this podcast. Mark, it has been super. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
We will talk so much more in the months to come. We will work out how we get you round as many battalions and events and all of that. We'll work that all out, but it'll be an absolute pleasure to work together with you. Congratulations once again.
Oh, thank you.
President of the Northern Ireland Boys Brigade, and thank you so much for coming and sharing a little bit of yourself with everybody just as we start the introductions of this. So thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to our podcast if you want to keep up to date with the fabulous guests that we have coming into this podcast studio.
You are listening to the BBNI Podcast, Journeys of Faith, Leadership and Life.